The Unsolvable Problem of George Dantzig. I'll be right back. It was the bottom of the Great Depression, and George Dantzig was a senior in college. It was about a week before graduation, and as you can imagine, it was a pretty down-spirited mood on the college campus, at least for the seniors, because none of them, or very few at least, had any jobs waiting for them, and most of them would be standing in a soup line in a very short time. But there was one possibility. The senior who got the highest grade in the mathematics class would be given an assistant professorship and would stay on at the university. And so George began to ask him some good positive thinking questions. Why not me? He thought to himself. I'm as intelligent as anyone else in the class. I have as much skill in mathematics as anyone else. Why not me? And so he went home and he went back to his room and he started to study. And he studied day in and he studied day out. And on the day of the exam, tragedy hit for George. He was running late. So you know what happens when you're running late? You scramble as quick as you can, you put on your clothes, and you run off to your destination. And that's exactly what he did. And he ran into the classroom, and all the students had already started the exam. Well, George was handed his test paper, and he sat down. He looked over the paper, and there were 8 problems on it. He solved all 8 of them. They didn't seem very difficult at all. But then he noticed that there were 2 more test problems on the board. So he looked at the first one. He had no clue how to do that one. And so he put it aside for a moment because he was beginning to run short on time, and he looked at the second problem on the board. And that one appeared to be more difficult than the first one. And then the worst possible thing happened for poor old George. The bell rang. And he wasn't finished. And so out of desperation, he went up to his professor and he said, "Professor, can I have just a little bit more time?" The professor said, "Sure, George, but your test must be on my desk in my office this Friday at 4 o'clock, no later." So George thanked him and he went home and he got right to work. And it took him quite some time, but he eventually solved one of those problems. And now he was out of time. And so he went to his professor's office that Friday afternoon and nobody was there. So he just simply laid the test paper on the desk and he went home. As you can imagine, all day Saturday, George was very, very depressed because he just knew that somebody in the class would have answered all 10 problems correctly. And he wasn't sure he had. In fact, he only answered 9 of them. And he wasn't sure that he was correct on that 9th problem. But early Sunday morning, there came a knock at George's door. George groggily got out of bed and he went to answer the door. And he got the shock of his life when he opened the door. It was his professor standing there. And his professor said, George, you made mathematics history." What do you mean, Professor?" "George, you were late for the exam, were you not?" "Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Professor." No, George, don't worry about it. You see, you missed my introduction to the class. There were only 8 problems on the test. The 2 problems on the board were not part of the test. You see, I told the students before you had gotten there that it had been a joy to teach them these past 4 years. And if they wanted to continue having fun with mathematics, that they could play around with the 2 classical, unsolvable problems on the board. George, you solved one of them. Even Einstein couldn't solve these problems. And George, next week, you have a job as my assistant professor. Congratulations. When's the last time you labeled something unsolvable? Or when was the last time you said you couldn't do something because it was impossible? Well, I encourage you to take a look at it again, because just as unsolvable as everybody thought those problems were, George thought they were solvable because he thought he was supposed to solve them. You see, we got to quit asking if, and we got to start asking how. Not if it is possible, how it is possible. This is Mark Bowser. Thanks for listening.